Polypemon. My own name is Eperitus. Heaven drove me off my course as I was leaving Sicania, and I have been carried here against my will. As for my ship, it is lying over yonder, off the open country outside the town, and this is the 5th year since Ulysses left my country. Poor fellow, yet the omens were good for him when he left me. The birds all flew on our right hands, and both he and I rejoiced to see them as we parted, for we had every hope that we should have another friendly meeting and exchange presents. A dark cloud of sorrow fell upon Laertes as he listened. He filled both hands with the dust from off the ground and pawed it over his gray head, groaning heavily as he did so. The heart of Ulysses was touched, and his nostrils quivered as he looked upon his father. Then he sprang towards him, flung his arms about him, and kissed him, saying, "I am he, father, about whom you are asking. I have returned after having been away for 20 years. But cease your sighing and lamentation. We have no time to lose, for I should tell you that I have been killing the suitors in my house, to punish them for their insolence and crimes." "If you really are my son Ulysses," replied Laertes, "and have come back again, you must give me such manifest proof of your identity as shall convince me." "First observe this scar," answered Ulysses, "which I got from a boar's tusk when I was hunting on Mt. Parnassus. You and my mother had sent me to Autolycus, my mother's father, to receive the presents which, when he was over here, he had promised to give me. Furthermore, I will point out to you the trees in the vineyard which you gave me, and I asked you all about them as I followed you round the garden. We went over them all, and you told me their names and what they all were. You gave me 13 pear trees, 10 apple trees, and 40 fig trees. You also said you would give me 50 rows of vines. There was corn planted between each row, and they yield grapes of every kind when the heat of heaven has been laid heavy upon them." Laertes' strength failed him when he heard the convincing proofs which his son had given him. He threw his arms about him, and Ulysses had to support him, or he would have gone off into a swoon. But as soon as he came to and was beginning to recover his senses, he said, "O Father Jove, then you gods are still in Olympus after all, if the suitors have really been punished for their insolence and folly. Nevertheless, I am much afraid that I shall have all the townspeople of Ithaca up here directly, and they will be sending messengers everywhere throughout the cities of the Cephallenians." Ulysses answered, "Take heart and do not trouble yourself about that, but let us go into the house hard by your garden. I have already told Telemachus, Philoetius, and Eumaeus to go on there and get dinner ready as soon as possible." Thus conversing, the two made their way towards the house. When they got there, they found Telemachus with the stockman and the swineherd cutting up meat and mixing wine with water. Then the old Sicel woman took Laertes inside and washed him and anointed him with oil. She put him on a good cloak, and Minerva came up to him and gave him a more imposing presence, making him taller and stouter than before. When he came back, his son was surprised to see him looking so like an immortal, and said to him, "My dear father, someone of the gods has been making you much taller and better looking." Laertes answered, "Would, by Father Jove, Minerva, and Apollo, that I were the man I was when I ruled among the Cephallenians and took Nericum, that strong fortress on the foreland. If I were still what I then was and had been in our house yesterday with my armor on, I should have been able to stand by you and help you against the suitors. I should have killed a great many of them, and you would have rejoiced to see it." Thus did they converse, but the others, when they had finished their work and the feast was ready, left off working, and took each his proper place on the benches and seats. Then they began eating. By and by old Dolius and his sons left their work and came up, for their mother, the Sicel woman who looked after Laertes now that he was growing old, had been to fetch them. When they saw Ulysses and were certain it was he, They stood there lost in astonishment. But Ulysses scolded them good-naturedly and said, "Sit down to your dinner, old man, and never mind about your surprise. We have been wanting to begin for some time and have been waiting for you." Then Dolius put out both his hands and went up to Ulysses. "Sir," said he, seizing his master's hand and kissing it at the wrist, "we have long been wishing you home, and now heaven has restored you to us after we had given up hoping. All hail, therefore, and may the gods prosper you." 187. But tell me, does Penelope already know of your return, or shall we send someone to tell her? "Old man," answered Ulysses, "she knows already, so you need not trouble about that." On this he took his seat, and the sons of Dolius gathered round Ulysses to give him greeting and embrace him one after the other. Then they took their seats in due order near Dolius their father. While they were thus busy getting their dinner ready, rumor went round the town, and noised abroad the terrible fate that had befallen the suitors. As soon, therefore, as the people heard of it, they gathered from every quarter, groaning and hooting before the house of Ulysses. They took the dead away, buried every man his own, and put the bodies of those who came from elsewhere on board the fishing vessels, for the fishermen to take each of them to his own place. They then met angrily in the place of assembly, and when they were got together, Eupeithes rose to speak. He was overwhelmed with grief for the death of his son Antinous, who had been the first man killed by Ulysses, so he said, weeping bitterly, "My friends, this man has done the Achaeans great wrong. He took many of our best men away with him in his fleet, and he has lost both ships and men. Now, moreover, on his return he has been killing all the foremost men among the Cephallenians. Let us be up and doing before he can get away to Pylos or to Illes where the Epeans rule, or we shall be ashamed of ourselves for ever afterwards. It will be an everlasting disgrace to us if we do not avenge the murder of our sons and brothers. For my own part, I should have no more pleasure in life, but had rather die at once. Let us be up, then, and after them before they can cross over to the main land." He wept as he spoke, and everyone pitied him. But Medon and the bard Phemius had now woke up, and came to them from the house of Ulysses. Everyone was astonished at seeing them, but they stood in the middle of the assembly, and Medon said, "Hear me, men of Ithaca. Ulysses did not do these things against the will of heaven. I myself saw an immortal god take the form of Mentor and stand beside him. This god appeared, now in front of him encouraging him, and now going furiously about the court, and attacking the suitors, whereon they fell thick on one another. On this pale fear laid hold of them, and old Halitherses, son of Master, rose to speak, for he was the only man among them who knew both past and future. So he spoke to them plainly and in all honesty, saying, "Men of Ithaca, it is all your own fault that things have turned out as they have. You would not listen to me, nor yet to Mentor, when we bade you check the folly of your sons who were doing much wrong in the wantonness of their hearts, wasting the substance and dishonoring the wife of a chieftain who they thought would not return. Now, however, let it be as I say, and do as I tell you. Do not go out against Ulysses, or you may find that you have been drawing down evil on your own heads." This was what he said, and more than half raised a loud shout, and at once left the assembly. But the rest stayed where they were, for the speech of Halitherses displeased them, and they sided with Eupeithes. They therefore hurried off for their armor, and when they had armed themselves, they met together in front of the city, and Eupeithes led them on in their folly. He thought he was going to avenge the murder of his son, whereas in truth he was never to return, but was himself to perish in his attempt. Then Minerva said to Jove, "Father, son of Saturn, king of kings, answer me this question. What do you propose to do? Will you set them fighting still further, or will you make peace between them?" And Jove answered, "My child, why should you ask me? Was it not by your own arrangement that Ulysses came home and took his revenge upon the suitors? Do whatever you like, but I will tell you what I think will be most reasonable arrangement. Now that Ulysses is revenged, let them swear to a solemn covenant, in virtue of which he shall continue to rule, while we cause the others to forgive and forget the massacre of their sons and brothers. Let them then all become friends as heretofore, and let peace and plenty reign. This was what Minerva was already eager to bring about, so down she darted from off the topmost summits of Olympus. Now when Laertes and the others had done dinner, Ulysses began by saying, "Some of you go out and see if they are not getting close up to us." So one of Dolius's sons went as he was bid. Standing on the threshold, he could see them all quite near, and said to Ulysses, "Here they are. Let us put on our armor at once." They put on their armor as fast as they could. That is to say, Ulysses, his 3 men, and the 6 sons of Dolius. Laertes also and Dolius did the same, warriors by necessity in spite of their gray hair. When they had all put on their armor, they opened the gate and sallied forth, Ulysses leading the way. Then Jove's daughter Minerva came up to them, having assumed the form and voice of Mentor. Ulysses was glad when he saw her, and said to his son Telemachus, "Telemachus, now that you are about to fight in an engagement which will show every man's mettle, be sure not to disgrace your ancestors, who were eminent for their strength and courage all the world over." "You say truly, my dear father," answered Telemachus, "and you shall see, if you will, that I am in no mind to disgrace your family." Laertes was delighted when he heard this. "Good heavens," he exclaimed, "what a day I am enjoying! I do indeed rejoice at it. My son and grandson are vying with one another in the matter of valor." On this Minerva came close up to him and said, "Son of Arcesius, best friend I have in the world, pray to the blue-eyed damsel and to Jove her father, then poise your spear and hurl it." As she spoke, she infused fresh vigor into him, and when he had prayed to her, he poised his spear and hurled it. He hit Eupeith's helmet, and the spear went right through it, for the helmet stayed it not, and his armor rang rattling round him as he fell heavily to the ground. Meantime Ulysses and his son fell upon the front line of the foe and smote them with their swords and spears. Indeed, they would have killed every one of them and prevented them from ever getting home again. Only Minerva raised her voice aloud and made every one pause. "Men of Ithaca," she cried, "cease this dreadful war and settle the matter at once without further bloodshed." On this pale fear seized everyone. They were so frightened that their arms dropped from their hands and fell upon the ground at the sound of the goddess' voice, and they fled back to the city for their lives. But Ulysses gave a great cry, and gathering himself together swooped down like a soaring eagle. Then the son of Saturn sent a thunderbolt of fire that fell just in front of Minerva. So she said to Ulysses, "Ulysses, noble son of Laertes, stop this awful strife, or Jove will be angry with you." Thus spoke Minerva, and Ulysses obeyed her gladly. Then Minerva assumed the form and voice of Mentor, and presently made a covenant of peace between the 2 contending parties. Footnotes: 1. Black races are evidently known to the writer as stretching all across Africa, one half looking west on to the Atlantic, and the other east on to the Indian Ocean. 2. The original use of the footstool was probably less to rest the feet than to keep them, especially when bare, from a floor which was often wet and dirty. 3. The theta rho omicron nu omicron sigma or seat is occasionally called high, as being higher than the theta rho letta 1 FC6 nu upsilon sigma or low footstool. It was probably no higher than an ordinary chair is now, and seems to have had no back. For Temesa was on the west coast of the toe of Italy, in what is now the Gulf of Star Euphemia. It was famous in remote times for its copper mines, which, however, were worked out when Strabo wrote. 5IE, with a current in it. See illustrations and map near the end of BKS. V and Roman 6, respectively. 6 reading nu eta rho iota tau letter 1 ff3 for nu eta iota letter 1 ff3 cf. Odd. Roman 3, 81 where the same mistake is made, and Roman 13, 351 where the mountain is called Neritum, the same place being intended both here and in book Roman 13. 7. It is never plausibly explained why Penelope cannot do this, and from BK. Roman 2. It is clear that she kept on deliberately encouraging the suitors, though we are asked to believe that she was only fooling them. 8. See note on Odd. 365. 9. Middle Argos means the Peloponnese, which, however, is never so called in the Iliad. I presume middle means middle between the two Greek-speaking countries of Asia Minor and Sicily, with South Italy. For that parts of Sicily and also large parts, though not the whole of South Italy, were inhabited by Greek-speaking races centuries before the Dorian colonizations can hardly be doubted. The Sicilians, and also the Sicels, both of them probably spoke Greek. 10 cf. Roman 6, 490 to 495. In the Iliad it is war, not speech. That is a man's matter. It argues a certain hardness, or at any rate dislike of the Iliad on the part of the writer of the Odyssey, that she should have adopted Hector's farewell to Andromache here, as elsewhere in the poem, for a scene of such inferior pathos. 11 mu epsilon gamma alpha rho alpha, sigma kappa iota omicron epsilon nu tau alpha. The whole open court with the covered cloister running round it was called mu epsilon gamma alpha rho omicron nu, or mu epsilon gamma alpha rho alpha. But the covered part was distinguished by being called shady or shadow-giving. It was in this part that the tables for the suitors were laid. The fountain court at Hampton Court may serve as an illustration, save as regards the use of arches instead of wooden supports and rafters, and the arrangement is still common in Sicily. The usual translation, shadowy or dusky halls, gives a false idea of the scene. 12. The reader will note the extreme care which the writer takes to make it clear that none of the suitors were allowed to sleep in Ulysses' house. 13. See Appendix G in plan of Ulysses' house. 14. I imagine this passage to be a rejoinder to Roman 23, 702 to 705, in which a tripod is valued at 12 oxen, and a good useful maid of all work at only 4. The scrupulous regard of Laertes for his wife's feelings is of a piece with the extreme jealousy for the honor of woman, which is manifest throughout the Odyssey. 15. Chi iota tau letter 1 ff6 nu alpha. The chi iota tau omega nu, or tunica, was a shirt or shift, and served as the chief undergarment of the Greeks and Romans, whether men or women. Smith's Dictionary of Greek and Roman Antiquities under tunica. 16 doors fastened to all intents and purposes as here described may be seen in the older houses at Trapani. There is a slot on the outer side of the door by means of which a person who has left the room can shoot the bolt. My bedroom at the Albigo Centrale was fastened in this way. 17 pi upsilon mu alpha tau omicron nu delta letter 1 f61 pi lambda iota sigma sigma alpha tau omicron delta omicron rho pi omicron nu. So we vulgarly say had cooked his goose, or had settled his hash. Aegyptius cannot, of course, know of the fate Antiphus had met with, for there had as yet been no news of or from Ulysses. 18 Roman 22, 416. Sigma chi epsilon sigma theta epsilon phi iota lambda omicron iota. Kappa alpha letter 1 F76 mu omicron letter 1 F37 omicron nu letter 1 F10 alpha sigma alpha tau epsilon. The authoress has bungled by borrowing these words verbatim from the Iliad, without prefixing the necessary do not, which I have supplied. 19 I eat. You have money and could pay when I got judgment, whereas the suitors are men of straw. 20 cf. Ill. Roman 2, 76. Letter 1 F26 tau omicron iota. Letter 1 F44 gamma. Letter 1 F66 sigma. Epsilon letter 1 F76. Pi letter 1 F7C nu cap alpha tau. Letter 1 F040 letter 1 F14 zeta epsilon tau omicron. Tau omicron letter 1 FD6. Sigma iota delta letter 1 F00 nu epsilon sigma tau eta. Nu epsilon sigma tau omega rho. Let 1 F44 sigma, let 1 Fe5 alpha. Let 1 F44, sigma phi iota nu, let 1 F10, let 1 F7a. Phi rho omicron nu epsilon omega nu. Let 1 F00 gamma omicron rho eta sigma alpha tau omicron. Kappa alpha let 1 F76, mu epsilon tau epsilon epsilon iota pi epsilon nu. The Odyssey passage runs. Let 1 F26 tau omicron iota, let 1 F44 gamma, let 1 F66 sigma, epsilon let 1 F76, pi let 1 F7c nu cap alpha tau, let 1 F040, let 1 F14 zeta epsilon tau omicron. Tau omicron let 1 FD6, sigma iota delta, let 1 F00 nu epsilon sigma tau eta. Mu epsilon nu tau omicron rho, let 1 F44 sigma, let 1 Fe5. Let 1 F44, sigma phi iota nu, let 1 F10, let 1 F7a. Phi rho omicron nu epsilon omega nu, let 1 F00 gamma omicron rho eta sigma alpha tau omicron. Kappa alpha let 1 F76, mu epsilon tau epsilon epsilon iota pi epsilon nu. Is it possible not to suspect that the name Mentor was coined upon that of Nestor? 21 I. E. In the outer court, and in the uncovered part of the inner house. 22 This would be fair from Sicily, which was doing duty for Ithaca in the mind of the writer. But a north wind would have been preferable for a voyage from the real Ithaca to Pylos. 23 Kappa epsilon lambda alpha delta omicron nu tau, leta 1 F10, pi leta 1 F76, omicron leta 1 F76, nu omicron, pi alpha, pi omicron nu tau omicron nu. The wind does not whistle over waves. It only whistles through rigging or some other obstacle that cuts it. 24 cf. Ill. V. 20. Leta 1 F30 delta alpha leta 1 FD6 omicron sigma delta leta 1 F00 pi omicron rho omicron upsilon sigma epsilon lambda iota pi leta 1 F7c nu pi epsilon rho iota kappa alpha lambda lambda epsilon alpha delta iota phi rho omicron nu. The Odyssean line is leta 1 F20 epsilon lambda iota omicron sigma. Delta, leta 1 F00 nu omicron rho omicron upsilon sigma epsilon, lambda, iota pi leta 1 F7c, nu pi epsilon rho iota kappa alpha lambda lambda epsilon alpha, lambda iota mu nu eta nu. There can be no doubt that the Odyssean line was suggested by the Iliadic, but nothing can explain why Idaeus jumping from his chariot should suggest to the writer of the Odyssey the sun jumping from the sea. The probability is that she never gave the matter a thought, but took the line in question as an effect of saturation with the Iliad and of unconscious cerebration. The Odyssey contains many such examples. 25. The heart, liver, lights, kidneys, etc. were taken out from the inside and eaten first as being more readily cooked. The Greek, or bone meat, was cooking while the Greek or inward parts were being eaten. I imagine that the thigh bones made a kind of gridiron, while at the same time the marrow inside them got cooked. 26 i.e. skewers, either single, double, or even 5-pronged. The meat would be pierced with the skewer and laid over the ashes to grill, the two ends of the skewer being supported in whatever way convenient. Meat so cooking may be seen in any eating house in Smyrna or any eastern town. When I rode across the Troad from the Dardanelles to Hisarlik and Mount Ida, I noticed that my dragoman and his men did all our outdoor cooking exactly in the Odyssean and Iliadic fashion. 27 cf. Roman 17, 567. Greek. The Odyssean lines are Greek 28 reading Greek for Greek cf. Odd. 186. 29. The geography of the Aegean as above described is correct, but is probably taken from the lost poem, the Gnosti, the existence of which is referred to Odd. 326, 327, and 350, and c. A glance at the map will show that heaven advised its supplicants quite correctly. 30. The writer, ever jealous for the honor of women, extenuates Clytemnestra's guilt as far as possible, and explains it as due to her having been left unprotected and fallen into the hands of a wicked man. 31. The Greek is Greek cf. Iliad, Roman 2. 408. Greek. Surely the Greek of the Odyssean passage was due to the Greek of the Iliad. No other reason suggests itself for the making Menelaus return on the very day of the feast given by Osts. The fact that in the Iliad Menelaus came to a banquet without waiting for an invitation determines the writer of the Odyssey to make him come to a banquet also uninvited, but as circumstances did not permit of his having been invited, his coming uninvited is shown to have been due to chance. I do not think the authoress thought all this out, but attribute the strangeness of the coincidence to unconscious cerebration and saturation. 32 cf. 458. Roman 2, 421. The writer here interrupts an Iliadic passage to which she returns immediately for the double purpose of dwelling upon the slaughter of the heifer and of letting Nesta's wife and daughter enjoy it also. A male writer, if he was borrowing from the Iliad, would have stuck to his borrowing. 33 cf. Roman 24, 587, 588, where the lines refer to the washing the dead body of Hector. 34. See illustration on opposite page. The yard is typical of many that may be seen in Sicily. The existing ground plan is probably unmodified from Odyssean, and indeed long pre-Odyssean times, but the earlier buildings would have no arches and would, one would suppose, be mainly timber. The Odyssean Greek were the sheds that ran round the yard as the arches do now. The Greek was the one through which the main entrance passed, and which was hence noisy or reverberating. It had an upper story in which visitors were often lodged. 35. This journey is an impossible one. Telemachus and Pisistratus would have been obliged to drive over the Taygetus range, over which there has never yet been a road for wheeled vehicles. It is plain, therefore, that the audience for whom the Odyssey was written was one that would be unlikely to know anything about the topography of the Peloponnese, so that the writer might take what liberties she chose. 36. The lines which I have enclosed in brackets are evidently an afterthought, added probably by the writer herself, for they evince the same instinctively greater interest in anything that may concern a woman, which is so noticeable throughout the poem. There is no further sign of any special festivities, nor of any other guests than Telemachus and Pisistratus, until lines 621 to 624, ordinarily enclosed in brackets, are abruptly introduced, probably with a view of trying to carry off the introduction of the lines now in question. The addition was, I imagine, suggested by a desire to excuse and explain the non-appearance of Hermione in BK. Roman 15, as also of both Hermione and Megapens in the rest of BK. Roman 4, Megapens in BK. Roman 15, seems to be still a bachelor. The presumption, therefore, is that BK, Roman 15, was written before the story of his marriage here given. I take it he is only married here because his sister is being married. She having been properly attended to, Megapens might as well be married at the same time. Hermione could not now be less than 30. I have dealt with this passage somewhat more fully in my Authoress of the Odyssey, p. 136 to 138. See also p. 256 of the same book. 37 Spotter and Lacedaemon are here treated as two different places, though in other parts of the poem it is clear that the writer understands them as one. The catalogue in the Iliad, which the writer is here presumably following, makes the same mistake, ill. Roman 2, 581, 582, 38. These last three lines are identical with ill. VZI, 604 to 606. 39. From the Greek, it is plain that Menelaus took up the piece of meat with his fingers. 40. Amber is never mentioned in the Iliad. Sicily, where I suppose the Odyssey to have been written, has always been and still is one of the principal amber-producing countries. It was probably the only one known in the Odyssean age. See the Authoress of the Odyssey, Longmans 1898, p. 186. 41. This no doubt refers to the story told in the last poem of the Cyprier about Paris and Helen robbing Menelaus of the greater part of his treasures, when they sailed together for Troy. 42. It is inconceivable that Helen should enter thus, in the middle of supper, intending to work with her distaff, if great festivities were going on. Telemachus and Pisistratus are evidently dining en famille. 43. In the Italian insurrection of 1848, 8 young men who were being hotly pursued by the Austrian police hid themselves inside Donatello's colossal wooden horse in the Salone at Padua, and remained there for a week being fed by their confederates. In 1898, the last survivor was carried round Padua in triumph. 44. The Greek is Greek. Is it unfair to argue that the writer is a person of somewhat delicate sensibility, to whom a strong smell of fish is distasteful? 45. The Greek is Greek. I believe this to be a hit at the writer's own countrymen who were of Phaeacian descent, and the next following line to be a rejoinder to complaints made against her in BK. Romans 6. 273 to 288, to the effect that she gave herself heirs and would marry none of her own people, for that the writer of the Odyssey was the person who has been introduced into the poem under the name of Nausicaa, I cannot bring myself to question. I may remind English readers that Greek phoca, means seal. Seals almost always appear on Phaeacian coins. 46. Surely here again we are in the hands of a writer of delicate sensibility. It is not as though the seals were stale. They had only just been killed. The writer, however, is obviously laughing at her own countrymen and insulting them as openly as she dares. 47. We were told above lines 356, 357, that it was only 1 day's sail. 48. I give the usual translation, but I do not believe the Greek will warrant it. The Greek reads Greek. This is usually held to mean that Ithaca is an island fit for breeding goats, and on that account more delectable to the speaker than it would have been if it were fit for breeding horses. I find little authority for such a translation. The most equitable translation of the text as it stands is, Ithaca is an island fit for breeding goats, and delectable rather than fit for breeding horses. For not one of the islands is good driving ground, nor well meadowed. Surely the writer does not mean that a pleasant or delectable island would not be fit for breeding horses. The most equitable translation, therefore, of the present text being thus halt and impotent, we may suspect corruption, and I hazard the following emendation, though I have not adopted it in my translation, as fearing that it would be deemed too fanciful. I would read, Greek. As far as scanning goes, the Greek is not necessary. Greek Roman 4, 72. Footnote Greek Roman 4, 233, to go no further afield than earlier lines of the same book, gives sufficient authority for Greek, but the Greek would not be redundant. It would emphasize the surprise of the contrast, and I should prefer to have it, though it is not very important either way. This reading, of course, should be translated, Ithaca is an island fit for breeding goats, and by your leave itself a horseman rather than fit for breeding horses. For not one of the islands is good and well-meadowed ground. This would be sure to baffle the Alexandrian editors. How, they would ask themselves, could an island be a horseman? And they would cast about for an emendation. A visit to the top of Mt. Urix might perhaps make the meaning intelligible and suggest my proposed restoration of the text to the reader as readily as it did to myself. I have elsewhere stated my conviction that the writer of the Odyssey was familiar with the old Siccan city at the top of Mt. Urix, and that the Egadian islands, which are so striking when seen thence, did duty with her for the Ionian islands. Maritimo, the highest and most westerly of the group, standing for Ithaca. When seen from the top of Mt. Urix, Maritimo shows as it should do according to Aud. Roman 9, 25-26, on the horizon, all highest up in the sea towards the west, while the other islands lie some way off it to the east. As we descend to Trapani, Maritimo appears to sink on to the top of the island of Levanzo, behind which it disappears. My friend, the late Signor E. Biagini, pointed to it once as it was just standing on the top of Levanzo, and said to me, "Come cavalca bene, how well it rides," and this immediately suggested my emendation to me. Later on I found in the hymn to the Pythian Apollo, which abounds with tags taken from the Odyssey, a line ending Greek which strengthened my suspicion that this was the original ending of the second of the two lines above under consideration. 49, see note on line 3 of this book. The reader will observe that the writer has been unable to keep the women out of an interpolation consisting only of 4 lines. 50 Scheria means a piece of land jutting out into the sea. In my authoress of the Odyssey, I thought Jutland would be a suitable translation, but it has been pointed out to me that Jutland only means the land of the Jutes. 51. Irrigation, as here described, is common in gardens near Trapani. The water that supplies the ducts is drawn from wells by a mule who turns a wheel with buckets on it. 52. There is not a word here about the cattle of the sun god. 53. The writer evidently thought that green growing wood might also be well seasoned. 54. The reader will note that the river was flowing with salt water, i.e. that it was tidal. 55. Then the Ogygian island was not so far off, but that Nausicaa might be assumed to know where it was. 56. Greek 57, I suspect a family joke, or sly allusion to something of which we know nothing in this story of Eurymedus's having been brought from Apera. The Greek word aperos means inexperienced, ignorant. Is it possible that Eurymedusa was notoriously incompetent? 58. Polyphemus was also son to Neptune, see Aud. Roman 9, 412, 529. He was therefore half-brother to Nausithous, half-uncle to King Alcinous, and half-great-uncle to Nausicaa. 59. It would seem as though the writer thought that Marathon was close to Athens. 60. Here the writer, knowing that she is drawing with embellishments from things actually existing, becomes impatient of past tenses and slides into the present. 61. This is hidden malice, implying that the Phaeacian magnates were no better than they should be. The final drink offering should have been made to Jove or Neptune, not to the god of thievishness and rascality of all kinds. In line 164, we do indeed find Etchenius proposing that a drink offering should be made to Jove, but Mercury is evidently, according to our authoress, the god who was most likely to be of use to them. 62. The fact of Alcinous knowing anything about the Cyclopes suggests that in the writer's mind Scheria and the country of the Cyclopes were not very far from one another. I take the Cyclopes and the giants to be one and the same people. 63. My property, etc. The authoress is here adopting an Iliadic line, Roman 19. 333. And this must account for the absence of all reference to Penelope, if she had happened to remember ill. v. 213, she would doubtless have appropriated it by preference, for that line reads, my country, my wife, and all the greatness of my house. 64. The at first inexplicable sleep of Ulysses, B.K., Roman 13, 79, etc., is here, as also in Roman 8. 445 being obviously prepared. The writer evidently attached the utmost importance to it. Those who know that the harbor which did duty with the writer of the Odyssey, for the one in which Ulysses landed in Ithaca, was only about 2 miles from the place in which Ulysses is now talking with Alcinous, will understand why the sleep was so necessary. 65. There were 2 classes. The lower who were found in provisions which they had to cook for themselves in the yards and outer precincts, where they would also eat, and the upper who would eat in the cloisters of the inner court, and have their cooking done for them. 66. Translation very dubious. I suppose the Greek here to be the covered sheds that ran round the outer courtyard. See illustrations at the end of BK. Roman 3. 67. The writer apparently deems that the words as compared with what oxen can plow in the same time go without saying. Not so the writer of the Iliad, from which the Odyssean passage is probably taken. He explains that mules can plow quicker than oxen. X 351 to 353. 68. It was very fortunate that such a disc happened to be there, seeing that none like it were in common use. 69. Roman 13. 37. Here, as so often elsewhere in the Odyssey, the appropriation of an Iliadic line which is not quite appropriate puzzles the reader. The they is not the chains, nor yet Mars and Venus. It is an overflow from the Iliadic passage in which Neptune hobbles his horses in bonds, which none could either unloose or break, so that they might stay there in that place. If the line would have scanned without the addition of the words, so that they might stay there in that place, they would have been omitted in the Odyssey. 70. The reader will note that Alcinous never goes beyond saying that he is going to give the goblet. He never gives it. Elsewhere in both Iliad and Odyssey, the offer of a present is immediately followed by the statement that it was given and received gladly. Alcinous actually does give a chest and a cloak and shirt, probably also some of the corn and wine for the long 2-mile voyage was provided by him. But it is quite plain that he gave no talent and no cup. 71. Roman 18. 344 to 349. These lines in the Iliad tell of the preparation for washing the body of Patroclus, and I am not pleased that the writer of the Odyssey should have adopted them here. 72, see note 64. 73, see note 43. 74, the reader will find this threat fulfilled in BK. Roman 1375, if the other islands lay some distance away from Ithaca, which the word Greek suggests. What becomes of the pi omicron rho theta mu omicron sigma, or gut between Ithaca and Samos, which we hear of in BKS? Roman 4 and Roman 15. I suspect that the authoress in her mind makes Telemachus come back from Pylos to the Lilybaean promontory, and thence to Trapani through the strait between the Isola Grande and the mainland, the island of Asteria being the one on which Motier afterwards stood. 76. Roman 18. 533 to 534. The sudden lapse into the third person here for a couple of lines is due to the fact that the two Iliadic lines taken are in the third person. 77 cf. Roman 2, 776. The words in both Iliad and Odyssey are footnote Greek. In the Iliad, they are used of the horses of Achilles' followers as they stood idle, champing lotus. 78. I take all this passage about the Cyclopes having no ships to be sarcastic, meaning, you people of Drepanum have no excuse for not colonizing the island of Favignauna, which you could easily do, for you have plenty of ships, and the island is a very good one, for that the island so fully described here is the Egadian or goat island of Favignauna, and that the Cyclopes are the old Siccan inhabitants of Mt. Eryx should not be doubted. 79. For the reasons why it was necessary that the night should be so exceptionally dark, see the authoress of the Odyssey, pp. 188 to 189. 80 none, but such lambs as would suck if they were with their mothers would be left in the yard. The older lambs should have been out feeding. The authoress has got it all wrong, but it does not matter. See the authoress of the Odyssey, p. 148, 81. This line is enclosed in brackets in the received text, and is omitted with note by Messrs. Butcher and Lang. But lines enclosed in brackets are almost always genuine. All that brackets mean is that the bracketed passage puzzled some early editor, who nevertheless found it too well established in the text to venture on omitting it. In the present case, the line bracketed is the very last which a full-grown male editor would be likely to interpolate. It is safer to infer that the writer, a young woman not knowing or caring at which end of the ship the rudder should be, determined to make sure by placing it at both ends, which we shall find she presently does by repeating it, line 340 at the stern of the ship. As for the two rocks thrown, the first I take to be the Asinelli, see map facing p. 80. The second I see as the two contiguous islands of the Formich, which are treated as one, see map facing p. 108. The Asinelli is an island shaped like a boat, and pointing to the island of Favignauna. I think the authoress's compatriots, who probably did not like her much better that she did them, jeered at the absurdity of Ulysses' conduct, and saw the Asinelli or donkeys, not as the rock thrown by Polyphemus, but as the boat itself containing Ulysses and his men. 82. This line exists in the text here, but not in the corresponding passage, Roman 12. 141. I am inclined to think it is interpolated, probably by the poetess herself, from the first of lines Roman 11. 115 to 137, which I can hardly doubt were added by the writer when the scheme of the work was enlarged and altered. See the authoress of the Odyssey, pp. 254 to 255. 83. Floating. Pi lambda omega tau letta 1 FC7 is not to be taken literally. The island itself, as apart from its inhabitants, was quite normal. There is no indication of its moving during the month that Ulysses stayed with Aeolus, and on his return from his unfortunate voyage, he seems to have found it in the same place. The pi lambda omega tau letta 1 FC7 in fact should no more be pressed than theta omicron letta 1 FC7 sigma iota as applied to islands. Odyssey, Roman 15, 299, where they are called flying because the ship would fly past them. So also the wanderers, as explained by Buttman, see note on Odyssey, Roman 12, 57. 84 literally, for the ways of the night and of the day are near. I have seen what Mr. Andrew Lang says, Homer and the Epic, p. 236, and Longman's Magazine for January 1898, p. 277, about the amber root and the sacred way in this connection. But until he gives his grounds for holding that the Mediterranean peoples in the Odyssean age used to go far north for their amber instead of getting it in Sicily, where it is still found in considerable quantities, I do not know what weight I ought to attach to his opinion. I have been unable to find grounds for asserting that c. 1000 there was any commerce between the Mediterranean and the far north, but I shall be very ready to learn if Mr. Lang will enlighten me. See the authoress of the Odyssey, pp. 185 to 186. 85, one would have thought that when the sun was driving the stag down to the water, Ulysses might have observed its whereabouts. 86, see Hobbes of Malmesbury's translation. 87, ill. VZI, 349. Again, the writer draws from the washing the body of Patroclus, which offends. 88, this visit is wholly without topographical significance. 89, brides presented themselves instinctively to the imagination of the writer as the phase of humanity which she found most interesting. 90, Ulysses was, in fact, to become a missionary and preach Neptune to people who knew not his name. I was fortunate enough to meet in Sicily a woman carrying one of these winnowing shovels. It was not much shorter than an oar, and I was able at once to see what the writer of the Odyssey intended. 91, I suppose the lines I have enclosed in brackets to have been added by the author when she enlarged her original scheme by the addition of books I, Roman 4, and Roman 13. From line 187, Roman 24, the reader will observe that in the corresponding passage, Roman 12, 137 to 141, the prophecy ends with after losing all your comrades, and that there is no allusion to the suitors. For fuller explanation, see the authoress of the Odyssey, pp. 254 to 255. 92, the reader will remember that we are in the first year of Ulysses' wanderings. Telemachus, therefore, was only 11 years old. The same anachronism is made later on in this book. See the authoress of the Odyssey, pp. 132 to 133. 93, tradition says that she had hanged herself. Cf. Odyssey, Roman 15, 355, etc. 94, not to be confounded with Aeolus, king of the winds. 95, Melampus, Vide Book, Roman 15, 223, etc. 96, I have already said in a note on BK. Roman 11, 186, that at this point of Ulysses' voyage Telemachus could only be between 11 and 12 years old. 97, is the writer a man or a woman? 98, cf. Ill. Roman 4, 521, Greek. The Odyssean line reads Greek. The famous dactylism, therefore, of the Odyssean line was probably suggested by that of the Eleatic rather than by a desire to accommodate sound to sense. At any rate, the double coincidence of a dactylic line and an ending Greek seems conclusive as to the familiarity of the writer of the Odyssey with the Iliadic line. 99 off the coast of Sicily and South Italy. In the month of May, I have seen men fastened halfway up a boat's mast with their feet resting on a crosspiece, just large enough to support them. From this point of vantage, they spear swordfish. When I saw men thus employed, I could hardly doubt that the writer of the Odyssey had seen others like them, and had them in her mind when describing the binding of Ulysses. I have therefore with some diffidence ventured to depart from the received translation of Letter 1 F30 Sigma Tau Omicron Pi Epsilon Delta Eta, cf. Alcaeus Frag. 18, where, however, it is very hard to say what Letter 1 F30 Sigma Tau Omicron Pi Epsilon Delta Alpha Nu means. In Sophocles' lexicon I find a reference to Chrysostom, L. 242, A. ed. Benedictine Paris 1834 to 1839. For the word Letter 1 F30 Sigma Tau Omicron Pi Omicron Delta Eta, which is probably the same as Letter 1 F30 Sigma Tau Omicron Pi Epsilon Delta Eta. But I have looked for the passage in vain. 100. The writer is at fault here and tries to put it off on Circe. When Ulysses comes to take the route prescribed by Circe, he ought to pass either the Wanderers or some other difficulty of which we are not told, but he does not do so. The Plancti, or Wanderers, merge into Scylla and Charybdis, and the alternative between them and something untold merges into the alternative whether Ulysses had better choose Scylla or Charybdis. Yet from line 260, it seems we are to consider the Wanderers as having been passed by Ulysses. This appears even more plainly from Roman 23. 327, in which Ulysses expressly mentions the wandering rocks as having been between the Sirens and Scylla and Charybdis. The writer, however, is evidently unaware that she does not quite understand her own story. Her difficulty was perhaps due to the fact that though Trapanese sailors had given her a fair idea as to where all her other localities really were, no one in those days more than in our own could localize the Plancti, which in fact, as Buttman has argued, were derived not from any particular spot, but from sailors' tales about the difficulties of navigating the group of the Aeolian Islands as a whole. See note on Odd. X. 3. Still the matter of the poor doves caught her fancy, so she would not forego them. The whirlwinds of fire and the smoke that hangs on Scylla suggests allusion to Stromboli and perhaps even Etna. Scylla is on the Italian side, and therefore may be said to look west. It is about 8 miles thence to the Sicilian coast, so Ulysses may be perfectly well told that after passing Scylla he will come to the Thrinacian island, or Sicily. Charybdis is transposed to a site some few miles to the north of its actual position. 101, I suppose this line to have been intercalated by the author when lines 426 to 446 were added. 102, for the reasons which enable us to identify the island of the two Sirens with the Lipari Island, now Salinas, the ancient Didyme, or Twin Island. See the authoress of the Odyssey, pp. 195-196. The two Sirens doubtless were, as their name suggests, the whistling gusts or avalanches of air that at times descend without a moment's warning from the two lofty mountains of Salinas, as also from all high points in the neighborhood. 103, see Admiral Smythe on the currents in the Straits of Messina, quoted in the authoress of the Odyssey, p. 197. 104 In the islands of Favignana and Maritimo off Trapani I have seen men fish exactly as he had described. They chew bread into a paste and throw it into the sea to attract the fish, which they then spear. No line is used. 105. The writer evidently regards Ulysses as on a coast that looked east at no great distance south of the Straits of Messina somewhere, say near Tauromnium, now Taormina. 106. Surely there must be a line missing here to tell us that the keel and mast were carried down into Charybdis. Besides, the aorist Greek in its present surrounding is perplexing. I have translated it as though it were an imperfect. I see Messrs. Butcher and Lang translate it as a pluperfect, but surely Charybdis was in the act of sucking down the water when Ulysses arrived. 107. I suppose the passage within brackets to have been an afterthought, but to have been written by the same hand as the rest of the poem. I suppose Roman 12. 103 to have been also added by the writer when she decided on sending Ulysses back to Charybdis. The simile suggests the hand of the wife or daughter of a magistrate who had often seen her father come in cross and tired. 108 gr. Pi omicron lambda upsilon delta alpha iota delta alpha lambda omicron sigma. This puts coined money out of the question, but nevertheless implies that the gold had been worked into ornaments of some kind. 109. I suppose Teiresias' prophecy of BK. Roman 11. 114 to 120 had made no impression on Ulysses. More probably the prophecy was an afterthought, intercalated, as I have already said, by the authoress when she changed her scheme. 110. A male writer would have made Ulysses say, not may you give satisfaction to your wives, but may your wives give satisfaction to you. 111. See note 64. 112. The land was in reality the shallow inlet, now the salt works of S. Cusumano, the neighborhood of Trapani and Mt. Eryx being made to do double duty, both as Scheria and Ithaca. Hence the necessity for making Ulysses set out after dark, fall instantly into a profound sleep, and wake up on a morning so foggy that he could not see anything till the interviews between Neptune and Jove and between Ulysses and Minerva should have given the audience time to accept the situation. See illustrations and map near the end of BKS. V and Romans 6, respectively. 113. This cave, which is identifiable with singular completeness, is now called the Grotta del Toro, probably a corruption of Tesoro, for it is held to contain a treasure. See the authoress of the Odyssey, pp. 167 to 170. 114. Probably they would. 115. Then it had a shallow shelving bottom. 116. Doubtless, the road would pass the harbor in Odyssean times as it passes the salt works now. Indeed, if there is to be a road at all, there is no other level ground which it could take. See map above referred to. 117. The rock at the end of the northern harbor of Trapani, to which I suppose the writer of the Odyssey to be here referring, still bears the name Malconsiglio, the rock of evil counsel. There is a legend that it was a ship of Turkish pirates who were intending to attack Trapani, but the Madonna di Trapani crushed them under this rock just as they were coming into port. My friend Cavaliere Genai Trapani of Trapani told me that his father used to tell him when he was a boy that if he would drop exactly 3 drops of oil on to the water near the rock, he would see the ship still at the bottom. The legend is evidently a Christianized version of the Odyssean story. while the name supplies the additional detail that the disaster happened in consequence of an evil counsel. 118. It would seem then that the ship had got all the way back from Ithaca in about a quarter of an hour. 119. And may we not add, and also to prevent his recognizing that he was only in the place where he had met Nausicaa 2 days earlier. 120. All this is to excuse the entire absence of Minerva from books Roman 9, Roman 12, which I suppose had been written already before the authoress had determined on making Minerva so prominent a character. 121. We have met with this somewhat lame attempt to cover the writer's change of scheme at the end of B.K. Romans 6. 122. I take the following from the authoress of the Odyssey, p. 167. It is clear from the text that there were 2 caves, not one, but someone has enclosed in brackets the 2 lines in which the second cave is mentioned. I presume because he found himself puzzled by having a second cave sprung upon him, when up to this point he had only been told of one. I venture to think that if he had known the ground he would not have been puzzled, for there are 2 caves, distant about 80 or 100 yards from one another. The cave in which Ulysses hid his treasure is, as I have already said, identifiable with singular completeness. The other cave presents no special features, neither in the poem nor in nature. 123. There is no attempt to disguise the fact that Penelope had long given encouragement to the suitors. The only defense set up is that she did not really mean to encourage them. Would it not have been wiser to have tried a little discouragement? 124. See map near the end of B.K. Romans 6. Rakazu de Corvi, of course, means the Rock of the Ravens. Both name and ravens still exist. 125. See the authoress of the Odyssey, pp. 140, 141. The real reason for sending Telemachus to Pylos and Lacedaemon was that the authoress might get Helen of Troy into her poem. He was sent at the only point in the story at which he could be sent, so he must have gone then or not at all. 126. The site I assigned to Eumaeus's hut, close to the Rakazu de Corvi, is about 2,000 feet above the sea, and commands an extensive view. 127. Sandals such as Eumaeus was making are still worn in the Abruzzi and elsewhere. An oblong piece of leather forms the sole. Holes are cut at the 4 corners, and through these holes leathern straps are passed, which are bound round the foot and cross-gartered up the calf. 128. See note 75. 129. Telemachus, like many another good young man, seems to expect everyone to fetch and carry for him. 130. Ill. Romans 6, 288. The storeroom was fragrant because it was made of cedar wood. See ill. Roman 24, 192, 131 cf. Ill. Romans 6, 289 and 293 to 296. The dress was kept at the bottom of the chest as one that would only be wanted on the greatest occasions, but surely the marriage of Hermione and of Megapen, B.K. Roman 4, add in it, might have induced Helen to wear it on the preceding evening, in which case it could hardly have got back. We find no hint here of Megapen's recent marriage. 132, see note 83. 133 cf. Odd. Roman 11, 196, etc. 134, the names Syra and Ortygia, on which island a great part of the Doric Syracuse was originally built, suggest that even in Odyssean times there was a prehistoric Syracuse, the existence of which was known to the writer of the poem. 135, literally, Where are the turnings of the sun? Assuming, as we may safely do, that the Sira and Otiger of the Odyssey refer to Syracuse. It is the fact that not far to the south of these places the land turns sharply round, so that mariners following the coast would find the sun upon the other side of their ship to that on which they'd had it hitherto. Mr. A. S. Griffith has kindly called my attention to Herod Roman 4:42, where, speaking of the circumnavigation of Africa by Phoenician mariners under Nikos, he writes, "On their return they declared, I for my part do not believe them, but perhaps others may, that in sailing round Libya i.e. Africa they had the sun upon their right hand. In this way was the extent of Libya first discovered. I take it that Eumaeus was made to have come from Syracuse, because the writer thought she rather ought to have made something happen at Syracuse during her account of the voyages of Ulysses. She could not, however, break his long drift from Charybdis to the island of Pantelleria. She therefore resolved to make it up to Syracuse in another way. Modern excavations establish the existence of two and only two pre-Dorian communities at Syracuse. They were, so Dr. Odyssey informed me, at Plemirio and Coso Pantano. See the authoress of the Odyssey, pp. 211 to 213. 136. This harbor is again evidently the harbor in which Ulysses had landed, i.e., the harbor that is now the salt works of S. Cusumano. 137. This never can have been anything but very niggardly pay for some 8 or 9 days' service. I suppose the crew were to consider the pleasure of having had a trip to Pylos as a set-off. There is no trace of the dinner as having been actually given, either on the following or any other morning. 138. No hawk can tear its prey while it is on the wing. 139. The text is here apparently corrupt, and will not make sense as it stands. I follow Messrs. Butcher and Lang in omitting line 101. 140 i.e. to be milked, as in South Italian and Sicilian towns at the present day. 141. The butchering and making ready the carcasses took place partly in the outer yard and partly in the open part of the inner court. 142. These words cannot mean that it would be afternoon soon after they were spoken. Ulysses and Eumaeus reached the town, which was some way off, Romans 17. 25. In time for the suitors' early meal, Romans 17. 170 and 176 say at 10 or 11 o'clock. The context of the rest of the book shows this. Eumaeus and Ulysses, therefore, cannot have started later than 8 or 9, and Eumaeus's words must be taken as an exaggeration for the purpose of making Ulysses bestir himself. 143. I imagine the fountain to have been somewhere about where the church of the Madonna di Trapani now stands, and to have been fed with water from what is now called the Fontana de Fali on Mt. Urix. 144. From this and other passages in the Odyssey, it appears that we are in an age anterior to the use of coined money, an age when cauldrons, tripods, swords, cattle, chattels of all kinds, measures of corn, wine, or oil, etc., etc., not to say pieces of gold, silver, bronze, or even iron, wrought more or less, but unstamped, were the nearest approach to a currency that had as yet been reached. 145 gr. Let 1 F10 sigma, mu epsilon sigma sigma omicron nu. 146. I correct these proofs abroad and am not within reach of Hesiod, but surely this passage suggests acquaintance with the works and ways, though it by no means compels it. 147. It would seem as though Eurynome and Euryclea were the same person. See note 156, 148. It is plain, therefore, that Iris was commonly accepted as the messenger of the gods, though our authoress will never permit her to fetch or carry for anyone. 149 E. The doorway leading from the inner to the outer court. 150 C. Note 156, 151. These, I imagine, must have been in the open part of the inner courtyard, where the maids also stood, and threw the light of their torches into the covered cloister that ran all round it. The smoke would otherwise have been intolerable. 152 translation very uncertain. Vide Liddell and Scott under Greek 153 C photo on opposite page. 154 cf. Ill. Roman 2, 184 and 217, 218. An additional and well-marked feature being wanted to convince Penelope, the writer has taken the hunched shoulders of their sides, who is mentioned immediately after Eurybates in the Iliad, and put them on to Eurybates' back. 155. This is how geese are now fed in Sicily, at any rate in summer, when the grass is all burnt up. I have never seen them grazing. 156. Lower down, line 143. Euryclea says it was herself that had thrown the cloak over Ulysses, for the plural should not be taken as implying more than one person. The writer is evidently still fluctuating between Euryclea and Eurynome as the name for the old nurse. She probably originally meant to call her Euryclea, but finding it not immediately easy to make Euryclea scan in Romans 17. 495, she hastily called her Eurynome, intending either to alter this name later or to change the earlier Eurycleas into Eurynome. She then drifted into Eurynome as convenience further directed, still nevertheless hankering after Euryclea, till at last she found that the path of least resistance would lie in the direction of making Eurynome and Euryclea two persons. Therefore in Roman 23, 289 to 292, both Eurynome and the nurse, who can be none other than Euryclea, come on together. I do not say that this is feminine, but it is not unfeminine. 157, see note 156, 158. This, I take it, was immediately in front of the main entrance of the inner courtyard into the body of the house. 159. This is the only allusion to Sardinia in either Iliad or Odyssey. 160. The normal translation of the Greek word would be holding back, curbing, restraining, but I cannot think that the writer meant this. She must have been using the word in its other sense of having, holding, keeping, maintaining. 161. I have vainly tried to realize the construction of the fastening here described. 162. See plan of Ulysses' house in the appendix. It is evident that the open part of the court had no flooring but the natural soil. 163. See plan of Ulysses' house, and note 175. 164 I.e. the door that led into the body of the house. 165. This was no doubt the little table that was set for Ulysses. Odd. Roman 20, 259. Surely the difficulty of this passage has been overrated. I suppose the iron part of the axe to have been wedged into the handle, or bound securely to it, the handle being half buried in the ground. The axe would be placed edgeways towards the archer, and he would have to shoot his arrow through the hole into which the handle was fitted when the axe was in use. 12 axes were placed in a row, all at the same height, all exactly in front of one another, all edgeways to Ulysses, whose arrow passed through all the holes from the first onward. I cannot see how the Greek can bear any other interpretation, the words being Greek. He did not miss a single hole from the first onwards. Greek according to Liddell and Scott being the hole for the handle of an axe, etc., while Greek, Aud. v. 236 is, according to the same authorities, the handle itself. The feat is absurdly impossible, but our authoress sometimes has a soul above impossibilities. 166. The reader will note how the spoiling of good food distresses the writer even in such a supreme moment as this. 167. Here we have it again. Waste of substance comes first. 168 cf. Ill. Roman 3, 337 and 3 other places. It is strange that the author of the Iliad should find a little horsehair so alarming. Possibly enough she was merely borrowing a common form line from some earlier poet or poetess, for this is a woman's line rather than a man's. 169, or perhaps simply window. See plan in the appendix. 170I, the pavement on which Ulysses was standing. 171. The interpretation of lines 126 to 143 is most dubious, and at best we are in a region of melodrama. Cf. However, 425, etc., from which it appears that there was a tower in the outer court, and that Telemachus used to sleep in it. The letter 1F40 rho sigma omicron theta upsilon rho alpha I take to be a door or trap door leading on to the roof above Telemachus's bedroom, which we are told was in a place that could be seen from all round. Or it might be simply a window in Telemachus's room looking out into the street. From the top of the tower, the outer world was to be told what was going on, but people could not get in by the letter 1F40 rho sigma omicron theta upsilon rho alpha. They would have to come in by the main entrance, and Melanthius explains that the mouth of the narrow passage, which was in the lands of Ulysses and his friends, commanded the only entrance by which help could come, so that there would be nothing gained by raising an alarm. As for the letter 1FE5, letter 1FF6 gamma epsilon sigma of line 143, no commentator, ancient or modern, has been able to say what was intended. But whatever they were, Melanthius could never carry 12 shields, 12 helmets, and 12 spears. Moreover, where he could go, the others could go also. If a dozen suitors had followed Melanthius into the house, they could have attacked Ulysses in the rear, in which case, unless Minerva had intervened promptly, the Odyssey would have had a different ending. But throughout the scene, we are in a region of extravagance rather than of true fiction. It cannot be taken seriously by any but the very serious, until we come to the episode of Phemius and Medon, where the writer begins to be at home again. 172, I presume it was intended that there should be a hook driven into the bearing post. 173, what for? 174, gr. Greek. This is not Greek. 175, from lines 333 and 341 of this book, and lines 145 and 146 of BK. Roman 21, we can locate the approach to the Greek with some certainty. 176, but in Roman 19. 500 to 502, Ulysses scolded Euryclea for offering information on this very point, and declared himself quite able to settle it for himself. 177, there were 108 suitors. 178. Lord Grimthorpe, whose understanding does not lend itself to easy imposition, has been good enough to write to me about my conviction that the Odyssey was written by a woman, and to send me remarks upon the gross absurdity of the incident here recorded. It is plain that all the authoress cared about was that the women should be hanged. As for attempting to realize, or to make her readers realize, how the hanging was done, This was of no consequence. The reader must take her word for it and ask no questions. Lord Grimthorpe wrote, "I had better send you my ideas about Nausicaa's hanging of the maids, not maidens, of whom Froude wrote so well in his Science of History, before I forget it all. Luckily for me, Liddell and Scott have specially translated most of the doubtful words, referring to this very place. A ship's cable. I don't know how big a ship she meant, but it must have been a very small one indeed if its cable could be used to tie tightly round a woman's neck, and still more round a dozen of them in a row, besides being strong enough to hold them and pull them all up. A dozen average women would need the weight and strength of more than a dozen strong, heavy men, even over the best pulley hung to the roof over them. And the idea of pulling them up by a rope hung anyhow round a pillar Greek is absurdly impossible. And how a dozen of them could be hung dangling round one post is a problem which a senior wrangler would be puzzled to answer. She had better have let Telemachus use his sword as he had intended till she changed his mind for him. 179, then they had all been in Ulysses' service over 20 years. Perhaps the 12 guilty ones had been engaged more recently. 180, translation very doubtful, cf. It. Roman 24, 598, 181. But why could she not at once ask to see the scar of which Euryclea had told her, or why could not Ulysses have shown it to her? 182. The people of Ithaca seem to have been as fond of carping as the Phaeacians were in Roman 6. 273, etc. 183, see note 156. Ulysses's bedroom does not appear to have been upstairs, nor yet quite within the house. Is it possible that it was the domed room round the outside of which the erring maids were, for aught we have heard to the contrary, still hanging? 184. Ulysses' bedroom in the mind of the writer is here too apparently downstairs. 185. Penelope, having been now sufficiently whitewashed, disappears from the poem. 186. So practiced a washerwoman, as our authoress doubtless knew, that by this time the web must have become such a wreck that it would have gone to pieces in the wash. A lady points out to me, just as these sheets are leaving my hands, that no really good needlewoman, no one indeed whose work or character was worth consideration, could have endured, no matter for what reason, the unpicking of her day's work, day after day for between 3 and 4 years. 187. We must suppose Dolius not yet to know that his son Melanthius had been tortured, mutilated, and left to die by Ulysses' orders on the preceding day, and that his daughter Melantho had been hanged. Dolius was probably exceptionally simple-minded, and his name was ironical. So on Mt. Eryx I was shown a man who was always called Sonza Malizier or guileless, he being held exceptionally cunning. Updated editions will replace the previous one. The old editions will be renamed, creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. Copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation and you can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing project and may not be used if you charge for an e-book, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use copies of this e-book. Complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this e-book for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances, and research. Project Gutenberg e-books may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with e-books not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start full license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work. Distribution of electronic works by using or distributing this work or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg. You agree to comply with all the terms of the full www. Gutenberg. org/license. Electronic works. Electronic work. You indicate that you have read, understand, agree to, and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1. 8. Used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few, even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1. See below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg electronic works if you follow the terms of this electronic works. See paragraph 1. Below. Foundation or PGLAF owns a compilation copyright in the collection. Works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying, or creating derivative works based on the work as long as works in compliance with the terms of this agreement. For keeping the comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the you share it without charge with others. 1. D. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing, or creating derivative works based on this work or any representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1. 1. The following sentence with active links to or other performed, viewed, copied, or distributed. This e-book is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away, or reuse it under the terms at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this e-book. Derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder. The work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1. 1 through 1. 7 or trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1. 8 or 1, 9. With the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1. 1 through 1. 7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. License terms from this work or any files containing a part of this one. 5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute, or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1. One with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg license. 1E6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, mocked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official www. Gutenberg.org, you must at no additional cost, fee, or expense to the user provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the 1E7. Do not charge a fee for access to viewing, displaying unless you comply with paragraph 1E8 or 1E9. 1E8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from you already used to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing or by email within 30 days of receipt that S/he license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue works you provide, in accordance with paragraph 1F3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free. 1E9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing forth in section 3 below. 1F. Effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the project electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects, such as but not limited to incomplete, inaccurate, or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1F2. Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages except for the right of replacement or refund, described in paragraph 1F3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs, and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty, or breach of contract, except those provided in paragraph 1F3. You agree that the foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive, or incidental damages, even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1F3. limited right of replacement or refund if you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it. You can receive a refund of the money, if any. You paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you receive the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1. F4. Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1. F3. This work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1. F. 5. Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties, or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1 F6. Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this defect you cause. Electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged, and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure archive foundation, and how your efforts and donations can help. See sections 3 and 4. And the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. 501 C. 3. Educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's EIN or Federal Tax Identification Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 41 Watchung Plaza, 516, Montclair, NJ 07042, USA, +1 862 621 to 9288. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact Literary Archive Foundation public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform, and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork, and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments, and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and volunteer support editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the U.S., unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep e-books in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new e-books, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new e-books.